That is a lot of purple I'm looking at right now. Holy smokes. Ladies and gentlemen, happy Thursday. Which party faces more political risk from the government shutdown? Which party faces more political risk from the government shutdown? That is the Thursday poll question. Big day for baseball. Detroit baseball in Cleveland for the deciding game in the playoff wild card series. Excited, by the way, that LA is going to come to Philadelphia on Saturday. 3 p.m. today, Jack Flaherty pitching for Detroit. Play Gun Lake online casino and sportsbook app. They got you covered. Get in on the action. Live bet while you watch the wild card playoff action. Do that today and then look forward to this weekend because Wisconsin is at Michigan. Michigan State is at Nebraska. Sunday Pro Football, 4 p.m. Detroit, a 10.5-point road favorite at Cincinnati. My team at the Play Gun Lake Online Casino and Sportsbook, they've got you covered for all of the above, and you'll get this great deal. Play Gun Lake bonus box, 50% profit boost, 50 bonus spins on the Play Gun Lake Collect 'em online slot game, plus bet college and pro football all season with the team at Play Gun Lake, where there's always another way to win. You got to be 21 and located in Michigan. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday's poll results, a tad below what we normally get. We're normally in excess of 30,000 on weekdays. That's just awesome, by the way. I remember the days when we were in excess of 300 and we would be ecstatic. 28,942 on this question. Will Hispanic voters ultimately drift rightward as so-called ethnic whites once did? It was a 60-40 no. 59.76% said Hispanics won't go the way, politically speaking, as ethnic whites. I thought that my guest yesterday, David Paul Kuhn, was really good. I got turned on to this whole subject because he wrote a book called The Hard Hat Riot. The book was published, I guess, initially about 4 years ago, and now PBS, and they're streaming it constantly, has just released a documentary of the same title, Hard Hat Riot. Here's the short version. And these are words that the author who I hosted, and by the way, we release that as a book club podcast, 3 times a week, a book club podcast. This was my Wednesday release. In May of 1970, after President Richard Nixon expanded the Vietnam War into Cambodia, and the National Guard killed 4 Kent State students, the anti-war movement radicalized like never before. In New York City, campus turmoil from NYU to Columbia spilled over onto city streets, especially around Wall Street. By chance, thousands of tradesmen were also downtown building the city's skyscraper renaissance. From their steel perches, workmen watched protesters chanting support for the other side fighting their kin and kind in Vietnam. And on May 8th, workers descended from the World Trade Center and other half-built towers in a clash that engulfed Lower Manhattan and came to be known as the Hard Hat Riot. Masses of workmen pummeled college students who were protesting. And the argument of my guest is that this was really representative of the moment in time when Democrats lost white working class voters, and they haven't come back. And then he frames the question of, will Hispanics do the same thing? Because in 2016, Trump was able to put together this pretty strong white working class constituency and became the first Republican to win Latino men since they became a significant constituency. And then he won a majority of Hispanic naturalized citizens. Most of Trump's increased Latino support was within the working class. So there's an argument to be made here. And I can't help but wonder if the 60% who rejected that yesterday were doing a little bit of wishful thinking, hoping Hispanics won't go the way, politically speaking, of working class whites. Today's poll question: which party faces more political risk from the government shutdown? I have to tell you a quick background on this. I went to bed with a different poll question. I went to bed last night saying, is the government shutdown worth the risk for Democrats? And implied in the question, as I had intended to frame it, is that the Democrats are the ones driving the shutdown. Why would I think that? Because of their opposition to this continuing resolution. I know that many say, well, Republicans control the White House, they control the House, they control the Senate. That's true, but on important matters, you need 60 votes, not a majority. And this is one of those issues. I noted something, and I commented on this yesterday. Stephen Ratner has this really good analysis for the New York Times talking about what's really at stake here in terms of the healthcare issues at the heart of the debate. He posted a piece electronically, or the New York Times posted a piece electronically yesterday under the headline, 6 charts explain why Democrats shut down the government. I have this piece in the newsletter today because it's so chock full of data. But the title's been changed. The title has been changed. And I'm sure that's a recognition by the New York Times in the same way I made a recognition in altering my poll question wording today that a lot of you don't think it's a Democrat shutdown. And certainly the Democrats don't think that they're responsible for the shutdown. They think it's the Republicans. Ergo, why I changed the wording before Showtime. And now I'm asking you which party faces the greater peril from all of this mishegas. The Ratner piece, by the way, which I highly recommend, all the political skirmishing around the looming government shutdown, he wrote it obviously before it happened, has obscured the critical reason for it in the first place. Republicans have essentially stopped saying they want to repeal Obamacare, but quietly they're doing exactly that. And then he goes on to make the case that 20 million Americans face higher insurance premiums next year. Almost 14 million Americans could lose their health insurance altogether over the next decade. And I think that's a legitimate issue. By the way, the comments that were appended to the Ratner piece, the first 2 tell you all you need to know about the current debate. The first comment, the Republican, in terms of popularity, this doesn't mean the first person who got there to post. The Republicans have the presidency, the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. They're shutting down the government. Comment number 2, if Republicans need Democrats' votes, then they must negotiate and include things Democrats want. If they don't, then Republicans are responsible for a shutdown. Reflective of the fact, the second comment, I think, understands that you need 60 votes. You can't just say, well, Republicans, you control it. They would pass it in a heartbeat. Rand Paul was the only defector, and I'm sure he would come around. So they need Democrats to do it. My comments from yesterday stand. I believe that Democrats have the more noble side of the argument in trying to maintain elements of the Affordable Care Act that have been cut to their core by Republicans. At its core, I guess I should say it this way, Dems have agreed to temporarily fund the government. They did this in March, but now they're demanding that Republicans make concessions on health care, namely extension of Obamacare subsidies and a reversal of Trump-directed cuts to Medicaid. I think that the Democrats are on the right side of that issue, but I do not believe that this is the way that they should be waging this battle. I don't think that you shut down the government on a continuing resolution that is clean and try and litigate some other aspect. It could be this, it could be immigration, it could be something related to the economy. I'm taking nothing away from the merit of this issue. I just think that this is not the forum in which they ought to be waging this battle. You've heard me say before, the Affordable Care Act is the worst possible process, proposal, formula for providing health insurance, except for all the others. And the Republicans have not proposed anything that I'm aware of, no alternative to the ACA. The ACA still makes sense to me. Everybody needs to have insurance. If everybody has insurance, including the young invincibles, then the system, the pool, can afford to take care of those with pre-existing conditions, and we don't have to rule you out for your pre-existing condition, and everybody goes on an exchange and in a competitive marketplace buys from a private insurer health insurance. There's nothing socialist about that. Quite the contrary. That's why it came out of the Heritage Foundation. But I disagree in terms of this being the way in which to fight for the Affordable Care Act. I have my eye on two factors, just two things that I want to keep my eye on in terms of what are the politics of this. My eyes are on the TSA, maybe because I'm flying this weekend, and also on insurance companies and when premiums come out, alerting people to the rise in their health insurance. Because if the premiums come out soon, and I don't know when they will because the rates are fixed till the end of the year, if people actually get the notice in the mail and it shows them, hey, I'm looking at 20% more for my health insurance, it becomes much more of a winning issue for Democrats. But if the TSA, I mean, if at one airport, this could so easily be triggered. If at one airport, you get a number of TSA agents who are now, having to show up but not get paid, they'll get paid eventually. And if they decide they're calling in sick and flyers get backed up and people miss commitments and so forth, then it's going to immediately bring a lot of pressure to bear. On which side, you're going to have to help me figure out. I take note of the fact that before the shutdown began, there was New York Times and Siena College polling, which showed that Democrats, here it is, 2/3 of registered voters in the recent New York Times Siena poll conducted before the shutdown said Democrats should not allow the government to halt, even if their demands were not met. But now the more recent polling, and these are just flash polls that have come out, I'm looking at two. One of them is from the Washington Post. 47% blame Trump and the Republicans. 30% blame Democrats. 23% say they're not sure. And then you go to the New York Times. 19% said Democrats. 26% said Trump and Republicans. The rest said they blamed them each equally. So before it began, a poll suggested that Democrats would bear the brunt. Now that it's begun, day two, people are saying they're blaming the Republicans more, probably because they misunderstand the 60 vote issue. So anyway, that's a long-winded explanation, but a worthy one, right? A long-winded explanation of today's poll question at Smerconish.com, which was modified in the overnight hours. Which party faces more political risk from the government shutdown? Please go vote on the poll question. For those who are fasting today for Yom Kippur, I wish you all good things. Survive that fast. I also want to point out that episode 3 of the Mingle Project is posted right here on my YouTube channel. Please make sure that you're watching it. I talk about talk radio with Dr. Brian Rosenwald, and it really turned out well, and I think it has good data. So subscribe, please, to my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and see you soon on radio.